G'day, it's fugitive Australian journalist Shane Dowling from the website kangaroocourtofaustralia.com. Now I'm about to play a video. It's Amy Brown having the political whack put on her on the instructions of New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet. That's very obvious. Now it's from the budget estimates hearing on the 7th of September 2022. Daniel Mookie, a Labor politician, is questioning Michael Coates-Trotter. And that in itself is quite fascinating because Michael Coates-Trotter is a Secretary of the New South Wales Department of Premier and Cabinet. So he's the most senior public servant in the country. Oh, in New South Wales, I mean. And what's fascinating about it is he reports to Dominic Perrottet, a Liberal Premier of New South Wales, while he's married to Tanya Plibersek, a Labor Party federal politician. So you've got the political parties crossing boundary lines, and because there's a political whack being put on Amy Brown to cover up the John Barilaro $500,000 New York job scandal, which was a job for the boys routine, they've decided to take out Amy Brown, a bit like the mafia, where they're working together. So I find it very amusing that a Labor Party boy like Michael Coates-Trotter, while he's married to a Labor Party politician, in Tanya Plibersek, is helping a Liberal Party Premier put the political whack on a public servant to cover up government corruption. Anyhow, let's watch the video and you can be the judge yourself.
Kate Maher, Deputy Secretary, Community Engagement Group, Department of Premier and Cabinet. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given by me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
And Sarah Cruikshank, Deputy Secretary, Policy Group at Department of Premier and Cabinet. I solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence now about to be given to me shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. So we will begin our questions this afternoon with the opposition.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Secretary, for your attendance this afternoon. Pleasure to see you as always. And to all your officials.
Great to be back.
Thank you, too. Look, this is our last day. We're looking forward to this being over. Secretary, can I ask you to take me through your response to the head review?
Yes, I received Mr. Head's report on the 12th of August. I considered it for, I think, 6 days, and on the 18th of August I spoke with Ms. Brown and expressed a preliminary view to her that I had formed from reading Mr. Head's report.
What was the preliminary view? What date did you have that conversation?
On the 18th of August.
18th of August. And was it in person or was it on the phone? Or?
It was on the phone.
And you expressed to her a preliminary view? I expressed
a preliminary view, and my preliminary view was and is that she had not satisfactorily performed the function of Secretary. And I should state that it's a preliminary view. I've not made a final view, and the procedural fairness afforded to Ms. Brown gives her an opportunity to make a submission to me in relation to my preliminary view about her performance, and I must and will consider whatever submission she makes with an open mind.
And you do, and no one disputes that, Mr. Secretary. Can I just establish some surrounding, I guess, establish a basis of facts. You are, the Premier is the employer of all secretaries, correct?
That's right.
And he's issued an instrument of delegation to you?
Yes.
And that delegation took place when you became the Secretary of DPC last year?
I don't know. I don't know at what point it took place, but Premiers, certainly since the creation of the Government Sector Employment Act, it's usual for Premiers to delegate under Section 81 employer functions to people who hold my role, and Premier Perrottet has done that.
Employed Miss Brown as Secretary in, was it February or March this year?
It was January from memory, 27th of January, I think.
Yeah, okay. And you, on the 18th of August, expressed a view that she had a preliminary view that is subject to further submission that you have to consider with an open mind.
Yes.
A view that Ms Brown hasn't performed the functions of secretary appropriately. In what respect has she not performed the functions of secretary appropriately?
Well,
at a preliminary level. In
forming the preliminary view, I had regard to the following conclusions from the head report. And I can read them out. But
please.
Okay, in respect to the first recruitment process, you gave ministers an incomplete and hence misleading picture as to whether suitable candidates had been identified, noting that Mr Head was of the opinion that you had no intention to mislead. In respect to the first recruitment process, your failure to consider relevant factors in accepting a late application from a candidate who had, through the normal course of their duties, access to information about other candidates in the process, and your failure to disclose this matter to other panel members during the panel's discussions, conflict of interest. Then in relation to the second recruitment process, my preliminary view was that Ms Brown failed to fully disclose to all panel members, having involved the then Minister for Trade in discussions about the composition of the shortlist, having arranged for one of the candidates to meet the then Minister for Trade while the selection process was still underway, for having discussions with the former Minister for Trade as to the suitability of Mr Barilaro for the role while the selection process was underway, and having concluded contract negotiations with Mr Barilaro without the selection panel having determined its final assessment of candidates.
Thank you. So that's in respect to the first, well, is that 5 grounds?
2 in respect of the first process.
Yeah.
And 4 in respect of the second.
6. Okay, so that's 6 matters. And just so to be clear here, is it the preliminary view that you have formed that in respect to these 6 matters, for which, again, a caveat that you have to consider any reply
yes,
with
I
an
do.
open mind?
I must keep an open mind and be seen to keep an open mind.
You do?
Yeah.
And, but it gives rise to a breach of Ms Brown's contract specifically?
Well, it relates to her performance in the role, which is the mechanism, is the contract she signed, which relates to which relates to a role description, and then of course there are responsibilities under as public servants under the Code of Ethics and Conduct,
which she also has to, according to her contract, comply with at all times.
That's right.
Correct.
Yes.
And so, have you given Ms Brown indication that, or provided her with notice that you are considering terminating her contract?
So the first step is to form a preliminary review of her performance, which I've done. I've indicated I'm considering the matter under Section 68 of the Government Sector Employment Act. Part 2 sets out the actions that I am contemplating or may contemplate, and one of those is termination.
What other actions can you contemplate?
Well, the other actions under that section include demotion, a reduction in salary. They are sort of somewhat of an ill fit with the Office of Secretary because they would require the consent of the person for them to be delivered. So termination obviously not, but demotion and the other actions under 68 would require a person's consent from the Office of Secretary. That would not be true of someone in a less senior position.
Okay, and so you've pointed out that is...
I've referenced that section and said these are the actions that I'm considering.
Okay, and how long does Ms Brown have to reply?
So on the 22nd of August, Ms Brown communicated with me. She presented evidence in support of a request to take a month's leave, which I have granted her, which I think expires, that 4 weeks of leave expires on the 19th of September. I will be back in touch with her at that point, asking if she is now able to provide a submission in response to the material that I've sent her, outlining my preliminary review of her performance.
Do forgive my ignorance on this matter. You actually have to approve her leave?
Yes.
Okay, right. And so, in effect, the matter remains in abeyance.
It's paused while she is on leave, yeah.
Okay, and then there's a resumption thereafter. So just to be clear, you're contemplating action under Section 68 of the GCE Act?
Yeah.
Are you contemplating any action under Section 41?
The preliminary view I've put to Ms Brown is that I've formed the view that her performance was unsatisfactory, so I'm considering it under Section 68. That's my preliminary view.
Okay.
Now, my view may change in response to any submission she chooses to make to me, but at a preliminary point, I'm dealing with it under Section 68.
Okay. And under that Act, are you able to make that decision upon receipt of any final submissions, or do you have any other hurdles that you have to satisfy?
So the usual course was you would receive a submission in response to a preliminary review about performance, contemplate that, make a decision on performance, then make a decision on what action I would take in response and provide Ms Brown, in this case, with an opportunity to make comment on that before finalising it.
Okay, but is the intention to resolve this matter one way or the other in September, October, November? How long are we going to, do you foresee?
Well, the unknown is Ms Brown's ability to provide a submission to me.
Indeed. The nature of the leave, I don't want to get too far down that pathway in terms of the nature of the leave, but is it affect is it annual leave? Is it
No.
capped form of leave? Okay, I won't push beyond that, Mr Secretary.
Okay, thank you.
But should we find ourselves in a situation where Ms Brown is in a position to resume duties, and pending the outcome, are you going to stand her aside, or is she returning on what date is she returning? 19th of September?
When I received the report from Mr Head on the 12th of August, Ms Brown agreed to go on special leave.
Okay, and she remains on special leave?
She was on special leave for a period. She's no longer on special leave.
She was on special leave, presumably from the 18th to the 22nd, so that was 4 days?
From the 12th
Sorry,
to the
10
22nd.
days. And then another form of leave?
Another form of leave.
From then onwards, and then on the 19th she will return to duties pending any further decision you make, assuming she's in a position to do so.
Well, until I am able to conclude the process of responding to Mr Head's findings and concluding the process I'm in, she will be on leave.
Okay. Just in respect to the 6 matters that you've put to her, you put to her view that she gave ministers an incomplete and misleading answer, was it, or was it incomplete information?
It was incomplete and hence misleading.
In what respect did Ms Brown give an incomplete and misleading
Because Ms Brown was asked whether the first recruitment process identified any suitable candidates.
Yeah.
She was of the view that she said it did not. She, according to Mr Head's report, took the view that ultimately Ms West was not a suitable candidate. But of course, the first process had identified another candidate as suitable and appointable, and there was nothing in the operation of the Cabinet decision that rendered that candidate unsuitable. So
that's an interesting point, Mr Secretary, because certainly Mr Head and others, look, maybe I'm misinterpreting what Mr Head said, but certainly the evidence that's been put before us says that quite explicitly that the Cabinet submission required Ms Brown to undo the previous process and reverse it. And in fact, that's what led to the termination of Ms West's candidacy. Now, Ms Brown has maintained the point, and again, you may have to reach a decision on this, so I don't want to necessarily put you in a position where you have to reach the view now. But certainly her view is, and Mr Head's view seems to support, our suggestion that the Cabinet submission did explicitly require it to be, the recruitment process of Ms West to effectively be reversed. And when it comes to Mr. Barilaro, and I guess the areas of interest in respect to his conduct, the question is whether or not he disclosed all relevant matters to the Cabinet in that sense. So when you say that like the Cabinet submission didn't require its reversal,
No, I'm saying the Cabinet decision brought a recruitment process to an end. It didn't undo the assessment through a recruitment process of the suitability.
she could have been appointed through the next process, basically.
Well, there were two candidates who were determined to be suitable in that process. Ms Brown's evidence here and elsewhere is that she ultimately formed the view as the hiring manager that Ms West was not suitable for appointment, but that still left Mr Fitzpatrick having been assessed as suitable for appointment.
And in any case, I guess your point would be is that all that should have been disclosed to the ministers for them to then factor in how they would explain it to the Parliament.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, specifically...
I should stress Mr Head finds that Ms Brown genuinely believed the advice she provided, that there were no suitable candidates, but there were.
And either way, perhaps all the facts, the point is that all the facts should have been played before the ministers, given that it was the ministers who made the claims in the Parliament.
Yes.
And just to be clear here, did Ms Brown brief the Premier directly?
Yes, she did.
When did she do that?
I don't know exactly. I can take that on notice and respond to you.
So when you're saying that the incomplete and what was the phrase you used? Incomplete and hence misleading picture. Incomplete and hence misleading. So
that's actually Mr Head's finding.
Incomplete and hence misleading. Yes, thank you. And that incomplete and hence misleading information was provided to then Minister Ayres.
Yes.
And Premier Perrottet directly by Ms Brown, is your understanding? Directly
to Premier Perrottet. I don't know by what means Ms Brown briefed former Minister Ayres.
And just to be clear here, Mr Secretary, Ms Brown didn't provide you the advice and you provided it to the Premier. She provided it directly to the Premier.
She provided it directly to the Premier.
And did she do that by phone call, meeting, briefing note?
Face-to-face meeting.
In a meeting, was that on the day that he was required to provide a response to Parliament?
Yes, I think so. And it was in the context of the Premier asking for the purpose of providing information to the Parliament.
Okay, so the Premier explicitly sought this briefing?
Yes.
And then presumably got the briefing?
Yes.
And then relied upon it when in providing evidence to the Parliament in question time that day?
Yes.
Okay, so what I'm finding curious about this, Mr Secretary, is that the Premier has certainly made the point that he got briefed by the Minister Ayres, and that in fact the information he provided to the House came from Minister Ayres, not Secretary Brown. And therefore, to the extent to which he misled, it's because he was misled by the Minister, not the Secretary. So what I'm trying to reconcile is, how is that possible if there was an actual face-to-face meeting with the Premier in which the Premier got a direct briefing from the Secretary?
I don't know what the Premier said, but it's entirely possible he was briefed by both Minister Ayres and Ms Brown, but I know that he was briefed by Ms Brown directly.
Okay, was that documented by any chance or not?
So it was my colleague Kate Boyd was present in that discussion, so that's how I know it happened.
Oh, Ms Boyd, come on down.
Sorry, Kate.
Well, were you there? And did Ms Brown inform the Premier that there were no suitable candidate? And that was despite there being two suitable candidates who were capable of appointment?
That is the conclusion reached by Mr Head, yes.
Okay, but you witnessed Ms Brown tell this to the Premier directly?
Yes.
Okay, and was Minister Ayres present? So Minister Ayres was present at the meeting. Okay, so it's possible that in fact what happened was that he's only publicly identified Minister Ayres, where in fact he was also told by the Secretary. It's possible. You don't have to comment. Okay, fair enough. Can I just go in respect to the Just in terms of the implications of a termination under Section 68, what are the implications in terms of termination under Section 68 in respect to the entitlements and such?
A termination under Section 68 attracts a compensation payment from memory of 13 weeks' salary as opposed to 38 weeks' salary under a Section 41 termination.
Okay.
So
is that in lieu of all other, in addition to other entitlements, or?
Yes, if you had accumulated leave, for example, you would take that with you as well.
So, if we're terminating Ms Brown for cause, or we're not, or to be fair, any secretary, in such a scenario, the minimum under that provision is that we still have to pay 13 weeks.
That's correct.
So, is there any other provision of the Act that you can terminate Ms Brown under which results in no payment?
Yes, I forget the section, but you can terminate for misconduct, and that attracts no compensation.
So this conduct amounts to a failure to perform the duties, but not misconduct. Is that?
That is my preliminary view, Mr. Mookie, after reading Mr. Head's report closely and taking advice.
Presumably from Ms Boyd or others?
No, actually from the Crown Solicitor.
Right. Sorry to point you, but Ms Boyd, you're often a suspect in terms of who provides this advice.
Object to that.
Getting better and better, isn't it? But can I just be clear here? If it is the case that there's been a breach of the code, how does that not amount to misconduct?
I'm uncomfortable about further elaborating on my views inside a process that's yet to complete.
Okay, but you have explicitly...
Can you just be satisfied knowing that I've thought very carefully about it, and based on advice, Mr. Head's forensic report and, the application of judgment, the view I formed is that I'm dealing with it on a preliminary basis as a question of poor performance and not misconduct.
Mr. Secretary, can I be satisfied? I'm hard to satisfy, hence the questions, but I take your point. If it is a case, I understand you're in the middle of a process and procedural fairness is owed to lots of people, so I take your point of not pushing too much beyond that part of it. Can I just...
Like I said at the beginning of the video, it's all about putting the political whack on Amy Brown, letting her take all the heat for their corruption. She's got two choices. She can either take the payout, which is, from what they're saying in the video, will be a 13-week payout, or she can go to New South Wales Independent Commission Against Corruption and blow the whistle. Either way, it's a tough choice for her. I have no sympathy for her. She was prepared to play the game. She whacked Jenny West. So if she's going to play the game, she needs to handle the consequences if she loses this game. But I think the whole thing should be investigated by the New South Wales Independent Commission Against Corruption. And the Patriot account I started up a month ago is currently sitting at 145 supporters, committed to $1,261 a month. So please support that if you can. It starts off at $3, $5, $7, $10, $15, $20, whatever suits your budget. And most people can at least afford $3. Please share this video on Twitter and Facebook, etc. Thank you for your time and have a good day.